Welcome to the Worldly Wellbeing podcast. I'm Holly.
And I'm Luke. Today, we're delighted to welcome Whitney Haldeman, aka Blonde Atlas, who is going to be sharing about some of her experiences, both in the travel industry, but also her perspectives on wellbeing in the world.
Let's jump on in.
So, hello, Whitney. Welcome to the Worldly Wellbeing podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for coming along.
Lovely to be here.
For those listeners who don't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my name is Whitney Haldeman. I'm the founder of Blonde Atlas, which is a travel platform. It started as a creative outlet travel blog that I started, 5 years ago now. And it's kind of evolved into a travel business. I serve a little bit as a modern day travel agent, creating experiences for clients, predominantly Americans who want to see the world, predominantly Europe. And that's also evolved into, I do some group travel now. I've done a series of trips called Atlas Adventures. So the first trip I did was last fall in Tuscany. So the goal with these trips is really to bring together like-minded travelers and take them, show them what I love so much about a destination. It was kind of a culmination of lots of nomadic travel that I had done. I just moved to London in the last, 3 months, but I've spent lots of time here because I've been trying to move here for a while, and in the process spent about 4 years traveling for stints at a time. And so, these trips really are just kind of a culmination of relationships I've built with hotels and tour operators, lots of travel vendors throughout Europe, and wanted a way to create these authentic experiences for other people who maybe don't have the time or the resources to plan something themselves and tend to kind of get trapped in by some of those, cheesy tourists on a big bus.
Do you have a flag then, Whitney, or not?
I do not. I do not.
So talk to Holly about tourists on a bus. It will bring out levels of rage that you might not be ready.
Let's not go there.
I try to create the opposite of tourists on the bus.
Could I ask a quick question about the name? Can you just tell us about Blonde Atlas, please?
It's actually the most unexciting story ever. I feel like I knew I wanted to start a blog, and I never could figure out for a long time I didn't start one because I thought it had to be one subject. It had to be a cooking blog. It had to be, whatever. And I started it before I had done any of my long nomadic adventures. So I couldn't even really, I didn't have enough material to be just a travel blog. So I was like, I want it to be kind of just a lifestyle. Like maybe I talk about health and goals and wellness. Maybe I talk about travel. Maybe I talk about, anything in the world. And so I knew I wanted some sort of world title in there. I literally just wrote out a list of a bunch of different words or things that I liked. I mean, we're talking everything from like champagne to plants I just made a list, and I was blonde. Atlas seemed representative of the world. They kind of clicked, and I was just like, that's got a ring to it. So really no excitement there, just picking out some words. I can't ever be like dye my hair red or brunette. It would be so off brand. So I've kind of pigeonholed myself into being a blonde
Are you a natural blonde?
When I was a kid, yes. So I'm more blonde, I would say.
As a baby, I was a platinum blonde. Literally, I'm not even exaggerating. My curly blonde, they were really tight curls, and it was a lot of curly hair. Yes, I was very cherubic. Like now, it's really on trend. If I could have hair like that naturally now, that would be great. I said I've just got really boring dark hair.
I suppose Blonde Atlas doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
So Whitney and I met each other in London at an event that was being hosted at Bloomsbury Central Baptist Church. And since we met, we realized that we had loads in common, and we've had loads of fantastic discussions since then. We've hung out, we've had great Japanese food, we've led an online course together looking at worldview and how that is perceived. I've heard your journey and how you came to setting up Blonde Atlas and kind of how you moved into the space. So how did you get to where you are now?
Long story short, I've always had a fascination with travel and an appetite for the world. I didn't really get started with international travel till after uni. predominantly because I feel like Americans, we travel so much within our own country. And there was kind of a lack of accessibility that I always was taught, that, you had to be really well off. It was really expensive to go to Europe. And so my family finally took me in, I don't even know, it was a long time ago. And yeah, I remember I always paint the picture of when I went to Rome for the first time, which is the first place I went in Europe. It was like that scene in The Wizard of Oz where everything goes from black and white to Technicolor. And it was just like, I remember palpably feeling this is the most alive I've ever felt. And yeah, so that appetite and that curiosity really kept me going. But I had a series of just things that kind of reset my life. I was in a long-term relationship that ended. I got laid off at my advertising job where I came from. And so I remember just being like, one of my biggest regrets is that I did not study abroad, and I want to travel for a little while, and kind of leveraged my blog as an opportunity for me to backpack, I would say, but it wasn't backpacking. I was doing partnerships with hotels and things like that. That's the simple version. But basically just really kind of learned through experiencing it myself that travel didn't have to be this unattainable thing. It didn't have to be this, you spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and really just taught myself to be scrappy and spiraled from there. And snowball effect, I guess you could say. Like the more that I started doing it, the more momentum I got, the more passion I got for it, the more opportunity I saw. So
I really like when you said that when you first went abroad, you felt like it was the most alive you've ever felt, because that's totally the expression that I use. Like living abroad or being in another country, for me, I feel like I totally come alive, like a little butterfly. I feel like when I'm in the UK, I'm often maybe hibernating a little bit more. But once I get abroad, I totally resonate with that. I'm like, yes, I'm just like alive, and I love it. And like, it's a feeling that I don't get apart from when I'm exploring somewhere new.
It's a sense of discovery.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like that sense of fresh perspective, that sense of exploration, that sense of wonder at what's out there, and how that then feeds back into us and how we respond to that, I think is really key.
Definitely.
And have you noticed, because I feel like only in retrospect sometimes do I see how much a traveling experience has shaped me. Can you see a kind of journey of being shaped or evolved through the travels that you've done?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first time I ever spent a night alone in a country in general. I did a 4-month stint abroad. Well, actually, it started as a 3-month stint and then I extended. But I had people meeting me for the majority of these trips, but there would be like little day windows where I'd be by myself. And I remember staying at an Airbnb in Milan, and my friend had just left. And the next day I was flying to Croatia to meet another friend. And I remember feeling so like I locked the door. I got like takeaway food, went and like locked the door, got in my flat before the sun went down because I was so nervous. And now I just laugh about that because I'm like, there's been a lot of confidence building, I guess you could say, in terms of, how the world used to feel like a scarier place to me. Yeah, I think I can definitely see a character shift or evolution, I should say, really particularly just about learning how I see the people in the world. I feel like I've shifted a lot more from fear to, obviously there's some bad apples, but I generally believe most people are good.
Travel's had like a really positive impact on your well-being.
Absolutely. Understatement of the century. And I think just, growing up, not just in America, but in the South is a wonderful place. It does get a bad reputation sometimes, because there are some small-minded people there, but there's a lot of wonderful people there too. But there are some of the stereotypes that are true where a lot of people maybe don't stray as far from the path that they've grown up on. So a lot of people look like them, worship like them, are on the same education level. And so there's not, compared to a New York or a Chicago where you get a little more diversity and all of that. There's absolutely a fascination with, wow, I never considered how many different ways there are to do life. There's so many different cultures, and I'm finding this fascination, mind you, in Europe, which is not that different than, it's like this wasn't happening in Peru or in Japan or something that would have been even more of a culture shock. So just to speak volume a little bit into how much of my own bubble I really was in.
I can see how it's not just about seeing somewhere amazing is deeper than that.
Absolutely.
And it's that, like, I guess, like the people, the connection, the culture, not just seeing something visual and being excited by it.
A big part of it too is the food. I know that sounds, I love food.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the whole dynamic. Even the little things like the language romanced me so much, seeing the different currencies, the different wall outlets. I mean, just so many things that subtle. It doesn't even have to be a huge, it's just the collective subtleties that really have a way of being like, wow, that's different and that's different and that's different. And so much is different. And that excited me.
Food is so much part of culture, like the way you deal with it. And I lived in Italy for a couple of years, and I just love that relationship they have with food. Absolutely. It overflows into how they deal with other people, how they almost just deal with life. So I think food's a really good place to start.
Yeah, well, and food is, it's very unifying when you think about it. Sharing a meal together is one of the first ways to unite people, to connect people. And yeah, some place like Italy, especially, where that's something that's so different. The pride they take in the regulations and the restrictions and the quality, and why it's so wonderful.
Yeah, and we see in religious contexts as well, like the meal takes center in Absolutely. Almost every world faith. In some way, there is a sharing of a meal. And I really love the way that we've picked up on the kind of different cultural approaches to food and, practices, not only in the making, but also in the kind of the mealtime setting. It's commonplace, perhaps in some parts of the world, to, we might say grace if you're like a Christian context before a meal. But like in Japanese tradition, there's also kind of a being grateful for the food that's put before you, and the phrase you say before and after the meal to acknowledge that gratitude. In Albanian culture, there is a phrase that you say before you eat as well that acknowledges the work that's gone into the food by the person who's made it. Tulum shumdua. So there's this real sense of the collective cohesiveness that food brings, from farming right through to when you're saying thank you at the end of the meal.
And sometimes I'm like, I just want to get this in my belly. It looks so good. I'm not saying thanks to anyone. I'm getting it in.
I did have that with a bowl of pasta last night. It was fresh pasta, and it was that I just need to eat this immediately moment. So Whitney, we've been thinking a little bit about the impact that events and experiences have on us and our well-being, but then also the impact that we then have on the well-being of others and the well-being of the world. And we see this kind of intersection play out, where there's almost that sweet spot. This is what well-being is: a good relationship between us and the world and us, the world and others and us. And I wonder what travel might say to that. Where are you seeing the impact of well-being on the world or on other people that you've met on your travels?
Yeah, I think ultimately when I think about well-being in relation to the world, and the impact that travel has on that, I think, well, twofold. I think the environment is a huge part. I know before I sound hypocritical, I realize carbon emissions and the impact that a lot of flying can have on travel. It is impossible to not leave a carbon footprint as a human being. And so I guess where I'm coming from with travel is being mindful of carbon emissions, being mindful of, yes, all of the ways that you can reduce your carbon footprint. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity to have a positive impact on the world, even, and dare I say, the environment, when you're exposed to your own privilege. Like when you travel to some of these places where you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many luxuries. Like, do I actually need, just even looking at it's disgusting to me to look at the consumerism that happens. UK is not even on the same level as America, in my opinion, with the way that people just buy. It's so much consumption, so much excess, so much over the top. And I think when you travel and you have those experiences, when you see how many different people live their life in such a different way, I do think that it kind of maybe wakes you up a little bit to realize, like, I don't actually need all this stuff. And like, there are other ways to live this life in a beautiful way that is more centered around experiences and people and meals and family and the way that you see other cultures.
Of course, not everyone has the opportunity to travel in the way that we have. And,
Absolutely.
we're so lucky for that. There's something really powerful in experiencing something yourself in a completely physical sense, not just seeing a TV program about it, but being there, seeing something with your own eyes that obviously has an impact on us. We can do that in our own communities. So for me, I find it easier to talk to someone about a hard-hitting issue if I have personal experience.
Sure.
Because it's no longer like this abstract, well, actually, I'm telling you about something that I've experienced.
Absolutely.
And that's really powerful.
Well, yeah. And I think even just the way you could look at this from a political standpoint too, when, a big debate that you're seeing in America is the people who are saying America first. But that kind of almost has this attitude of America only. Like, I worry about myself, you worry about yourself. And it's not as much this collective mentality. And I think that's what travel really does, is it makes you feel it doesn't feel like this chasm between me and this person from a different country. Like, we're both human and we live on the same planet. We should have the same goals to have equal opportunity for everyone, to have a safe planet to live on. So I think travel, it makes you feel like, no, we are all in this together, as cliche as that may sound. We should have the common goals and we should work together towards those.
That's exactly the thing. Like, we're seeing this hard swing to a more right political spectrum. And we're seeing this kind of America first. It's very similar to like Thatcherism of, Britain first, like, we need to sort our own stuff first before we could do anything else.
Don't say that word, Whitney. Speak not of that.
And the argument I often hear is, well, you have to put your own safety mask on before you can put someone else's on. They kind of reference the airline. But my response to that is, the reason that the airplane is crashing is because of us. Like, if we're going to extend that metaphor, the reason that the oxygen is depleting in the cabin is not because of some outside influence, is we've done that. So to say we have to put our own mask on first is not acknowledging the fact that we're the reason that we need to be wearing a mask.
We're the one who lit the plane on fire.
Yeah. Whitney, you were talking a little bit about environmental impact. I wonder if there's some examples that you can think of that speak to the travel industry or specific travelers when it comes to environmental impact.
Honestly, when I first got started, mainly because I was trying to save money. But when I would travel, I would always try to minimize the number of flights I was doing. Train generally is more affordable. So I would try and do like come for 3 or 4 months, stay for a long time, and then do like these shorter jaunts or kind of take the train to route my way. There were flights in there too. But I think you're seeing a lot of airlines now, while they're aware of their carbon emissions, you're at least seeing the option to tick boxes and offset your carbon emissions. So that's something I always tick. I think that's a great start. We talked about this, Luke, but you're seeing more mindful travel at actual destinations. You're seeing more sustainable hotels, sustainable destinations where the materials that they're using, especially I work with a great organization in Belize, and they want to make sure that they're not encroaching on the local communities, that they're empowering them to work there. They're paying them fair living wages, letting them be experts. They're not just coming in, taking the best land, paying them unfair wages, leaving terrible conditions. So it's how do you make sure that the brands you're supporting when you do travel are conscious and mindful? The more that consumers start demanding that, then the more that brands are going to say, well, we need to, and the more that they start positioning to be better, that's the step in the right direction.
So a bit like last week, we talked about if everybody just uses their pound wisely or thinks about where they're spending it, it can make a difference. And that's kind of what you're saying as well.
It can feel intimidating sometimes or discouraging because while one company may be doing this sustainably, they're not doing that sustainably. You can kind of start to feel lost in what is right across the board. What should we be prioritizing? But I think the hopeful thing that I have for the future is that we're having this awakening across the board. I mean, look at this year. I think people are really starting to ask themselves, how can I be more mindful in all of my purchasing decisions? That's my projection anyway. I think our generation is having this enlightening and we want to be conscious and we need to be conscious. We don't have the luxury with the way that the state of the planet. So we need to be assuming responsibility and just constantly, I guess, back to the question of what does well-being mean? I Googled the definition, the Oxford Dictionary, well-being, and they talked about a state of satisfactory or comfortable. And it was funny because I was like, I don't know that I resonate with the comfortable bit, Because to me, I think there's a growth mentality of how am I always making optimizations as I go? How am I always trying to be better? So yeah, I'm optimistic. I know travel may be my field, but I think across the board, people are starting to see the importance of how can they be more responsible.
Yeah, definitely. That optimism is really refreshing, because I know sometimes, and Holly will speak to this, I get into like a funk of, oh my gosh, I can't do anything right. You're compromised on every single level. If you are a taxpayer in a Western country, and if you have disposable income that you spend on anything that's not a necessity, you're compromised. And that can feel a little overwhelming. So the optimism is really refreshing.
I think it's really important to remember as well that growing and learning is also about making mistakes. And it's really easy for us who have this in mind that we want to improve the world and the things that we do to then tell ourselves off. Do you know what? Maybe there's no perfect option, but choosing any of those companies that do something well, that is better than not doing anything or not thinking about it.
Absolutely. And you have to think like there is a sense of responsibility where we say businesses need to do better, but then we always need to be asking ourselves, like, I need to be better too. If I'm staying at a hotel that's not a sustainable, eco-friendly resort, am I reusing my towel? Am I making suggestions even?
When we've been speaking about kind of positive impact and growth, this year in particular, for so many people, has been a real time of introspection. There has been a real opportunity to take a step back and start asking some questions around, what is good for me? What isn't good for me? How am I growing? What might I need to focus on? And I think that sense of growth and acknowledging that it is a journey is really important, and holding on to the fact that where we're at today was not where we were at yesterday and probably won't be where we're at tomorrow.
But I do feel optimistic that this is a moment in time. It's not forever. And so I do feel optimistic. Like when people have said, oh, aren't you scared for business? Aren't you scared for this? Aren't you, I'm like, honestly, no, because I honestly think experiences have never been more important. I think our generation specifically has already kind of, you really see a shift in that. There's tons of studies on this, from compared to the boomer generation, millennials really champion travel and experiences. We care about that way more than stuff. And so I anticipate we'll get back to a place where we can travel again.
Holly, it reminds me of that quote that was it was an Instagram post about travel being very similar to colonialism and trying to kind of get all these stamps in our passport and like, I have to go, I want to try this new place and then this new place and then do this new activity and see this new thing. And like what we can learn is that there's ways of reducing that. And perhaps doing more of what, Whitney, you were articulating earlier around acknowledging where you can go that is supportive of local community, that engages with the people who are native to that country, and becomes less about, I want to visit this country, I want to do that, I want to do this, but rather about saying, well, what is the experience here, and what benefit am I receiving, but what benefit am I also returning?
We talked about this a lot in our worldview class, Luke, but just the concept of being a global citizen, I think that ties into travel so much. And that could be something worth mentioning, because I think it's like, what is global citizenship? We talked about, a lot of people think that, like you said, about it being stamps in your passport or like taking great Instagram photos and seeing like you're so well traveled. But global citizenship actually is, in my opinion anyway, being a more mindful citizen of the world and where you travel, how you engage with people. But yeah, just being mindful of the impact that you have wherever you go in the world, whether it's in your hometown or whether it's somewhere that you're traveling.
Whitney, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today, to offer some of your thoughts, your reflections, and your experiences of being both someone who has traveled the world, but also who encourages other people to travel and engage. It's been really enlightening. Thank you. It's
been one of many wonderful, enlightening conversations that we've shared. Thank you for letting this be another one.
It was really nice to meet you, Whitney, and hopefully we'll meet in person with a glass of wine somewhere.
Maybe a bottle.
Of at least one bottle. Let's not be funny. Well, that was just a lovely chat to have with Whitney this morning.
Yeah, like I always love having chats with Whitney. It's always so refreshing and just a really encouraging way to view travel and how we engage with the world.
I mean, I kind of felt like, because we've got our little screens where we can see each other, I kind of felt like we were just sat having a chat in her living room with her Christmas tree up.
Oh, yeah. There was a little Christmas tree sparkling in the background.
Ooh, it was a slimline one. I've never seen one like that before.
Why are we talking about this absolute shite? We said we need to keep this brief, and now we're talking about her living room.
Say something.
Thank you again, Whitney. If you want to see more of what Whitney does, then you can head on over to her Instagram channel, which is blonde_atlas, and we'll be putting the link to that in the show notes as well.
If you do follow her on Instagram, please do it for us as well. We're trying to get our follower count up. Yeah. Thank you.
Sympathy vote, please help. We'll see you again next week for another episode of the Worldly Wellbeing podcast.
That was very polite, Lukey Babes.
It
Full
was.
British accent.
Goodbye, pip pip and cheerio.
Ta-ra for now.